In the time before the Titans, before the gods of Olympus, a great battle was waged.
Hello there, Seraph17 once again. This is my God of War Ascension Titan difficulty video walkthrough. This is the Cistern, and this is me doing some fancy rolls to speed up some of the traversal stuff, and we're about to fight some of the bugs. And the bugs come in an environmental variance. These are the fire ones. Through the game you'll notice they'll come in different colours and they'll have different effects. It's interesting that they went to that much detail on an enemy that is essentially a stopgap. All it does is waste your time. You know, they don't really do much except for protect you from certain enemies when they're together. They're an interesting design choice. But I should really talk about enemies on this game because it's very different to the old ones. And I was surprised at that. There are a handful of new enemies, and for the most, all of them are pretty decent. The only one I think is a bit stupid is the Amazonian lady. She looks like a character from Mortal Kombat. She's really uninspiring. She fights fine, she throws spears and stuff, and she interacts with the harpies, which is a cool idea. But the thing that really gets me is the execution move you do to her is the most uninspired, unlike God of War thing I've ever seen in my entire life. He just takes the spear off her and runs it through her. There's no, needlessly sadistic twist on to kill somebody with a specific weapon. And I think that's a shame. I was expecting him to take the spear off her, break it in half, and stab her with both bits. I don't know, I just expected so much more from it, and it seems really flat in comparison. Because there's another new element, that makes sense, another new enemy, which is this acid lady with green, praying mantis legs, who's actually really damaging on Titan. You only fight her, I think, twice. She has one of the just most painful looking things I've ever seen in my entire life. Because he bends one of her legs, which is a blade, he bends it upwards, grabs her head, and then reverses her body back onto it. And it's very similar to something that's happened before in God of War, but it's still gloriously brutal and you just can't redeem a man for doing that to this person. It's just too much. And the first time I saw it, it's just, oh, goodness me. Right, really? Just like that? There you go. Ouch. This is unbelievably painful. And then the Amazonian lady, just the flattest thing ever. It's like cardboard. But there's, like I say, a handful of new enemies. There's the elephant things that are quite interesting. There's these giant armoured guys with hammers which come in an elemental variance, and they'll do area of effect magics and stuff like that, which goes through your blocks, so you need to be careful. This right here is another one of the elemental trials. This is the ice weapons. Kind of wish they looked like that. That would be cool. But if we're wishing for things, I wish there was, 3 or 4 different weapons that weren't things chained to Kratos' arm. I love having a big slow thing that's ridiculous. I love having a stupid bow. I love having, a gauntlet on my shoulder that enables me to throw fireballs back at things. And I just enjoyed the diversity. And they've taken that away for specific reasons, which I don't think really fleshes the combat out all that much. Especially on Titan, where these fights are essentially spam throw. Spam throw. Literally, it's the safest way to do it. The only time you'll take damage is if when you're spamming throw you're at a bad range so he doesn't capture anybody, or if the game's auto-lock screws you, which does happen. You can also do this from mid-air if you want to. That will mitigate pressing 2 buttons to throw people. It's a lot safer too, but the only problem is Kratos throws them directly down. He doesn't throw them into other people, so you don't get any of the collateral damage. But speaking of enemies, there are a bunch of new enemies, but there are also a bunch of enemies that aren't in the game. And every God of War, certain enemies haven't come back, certain enemies haven't turned up, and it is, it's a balanced decision, it's a balanced choice. The one enemy I was waiting for the entire game that never came is the enemy that I can say easily was the worst in all of the games. It was the enemy that when you saw it or when it turned up, you knew you were in for a rough fight just because of the way that they played. And they had ways to be exploited and ways to make them easier, but if they were backed up by anything, they were a nightmare. And that is the satyrs. which for anybody whose Greek mythology isn't all that good, or they can't remember them, they were the goat guys with the crazy dual blade that Zidane uses on Final Fantasy IX, or Chrono in Chrono Cross. And God, they're assholes, absolute assholes, and they're not in the game. It's like the ultimate anti-Satyr dream. They are not in this game, unless these guys are supposed to be him, and I hope they're not, because these guys are rubbish. But completely missing from the game. The most intimidating, and just put two of them together and enjoy that fight, you know, because they were just brutal. On their own, you could grab them, and there was nothing they could do, but when there was two of them, you literally had to do the prop them in the air and then beat them up in the air, or just, you know, whatever strategy you'd figured out. It was really, really strange. Another thing as well, one thing that God of War has done, which just really, really bugs me, is why is there no benefit to using chests when you're full? Like, if you have full magic and there's a magic chest, why can't we open it and get orbs? You know, get more currency. Why can't we get a benefit for not using magic or not losing any life? I don't understand why there's absolutely no, you know, no reward in chests, and it means that you leave them behind all because you didn't need them, and I don't like that. And it's been in all of them, so I can't really complain. I just think it's kind of shit. But another enemy that's missing is the Minotaurs. Minotaurs are a big thing in God of War. They turned up a lot, and when they turned up, you know, when there was one or two of them, they weren't too bad, but when there was a couple of them, they could be really fierce, and they were an easy enough enemy, but they had to be respected. And they're not in this game at all. And I don't understand that. I can only think that perhaps the developers thought we might have had a bit too much fatigue with those monsters. And I'm all for them creating a whole batch of new monsters, but when they're going to bring back, you know, the Cyclopses with the exact same, you know, animations to when you're climbing them, even though on this one, instead of pulling their eye out, you do the evisceration, gutting technique, it just seems like a bit of a disconnect. To have the Cerberus, which is almost directly ripped from the God of War 3, this difference being it's a bit more colourful in this one. I don't know, it seems very strange to me. And so far, you might have noticed, I don't use my magic very often. The strategy with the magic that I have is I only really use it as a backup for when I'm struggling. I try to do as many fights as I can through using the combat alone, and that stems for I don't want to do a strategy that people can't do because they don't have the resource to do it. I do have a couple later on where I rely on magic, because the sirens in this game, wow. You know, they got rid of the satyrs, but they made the sirens so much worse. And the sirens were a pain in the ass in the previous game. And with my time with this, you know, this new title, I've beat it twice, guys. I've put in, give or take, about 20 hours. This guide took 8 hours to do. I beat it in 11 hours on my first time through. So I am far from proficient at every enemy. I do not know the best way to kill everything, and I did not figure out a good way to fight the sirens. When they're on their own, you can freeze them, or you can just use Plume of Prometheus to keep popping them in the air and keep them in a stun lock. But when there's two of them, you can't grab them because they've got an anti-grab move. They keep spamming that floor area of effect. They're an absolute nightmare. An absolute nightmare. But this is the end of the video, so thank you for watching, and you take care now.